Okay, so here we are. We're trying to understand the new wave of militant attacks, and you get more. What's it about?
There's been a surge in attacks in Nigeria's northeast by Boko Haram and other groups. We used to hear about Boko Haram, and then along came ISWAP, and then along came Lakurawa. And in the last few weeks, we have heard of another one that they say came in through Benin Republic, and it's in central Nigeria, called Mahmuda. So is it that they have viewed Nigeria as a place where they can thrive? Because all that we hear, all the fight we hear is going on, is not achieving much results. Because if it were, they won't be coming in such numbers.
Or is it the same thing that Ladi Thompson has been talking about for years? That the same attack or the same situation is just evolving itself, just shape shifting.
And he keeps calling it a hydra.
He keeps calling it a hydra. Is this part of the hydra heads?
Yes. So, we are wondering, at least 22 people were reported killed in raids last weekend by militants in Adamawa and Borno states, while 26 others died on Monday after an explosive device ripped into two vehicles in Borno. Are we not sick of hearing this every single day? If it's not here, it is there, and people are just dying like flies. These are human beings we're talking about. Security experts have attributed the resurgence to a lull in fighting between Boko Haram and ISWAP. Oh, they're now fighting each other. And the adoption of aerial technology by the groups. The use of armed drones also suggests ISWAP are receiving more funding from Islamic State. Last month, insurgents used drones to attack a military outpost near the Cameroonian border, killing several soldiers. So why this sudden wave? It looks like they're increasing in number and the attacks are escalating. Well, we have two gentlemen who are joining us virtually who are going to discuss this with us this morning. Mr. Mustafa Al-Hassan, who is an international development expert. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me.
And then there is our old friend, Dr. Oyewole Ogini, who's senior researcher, Bonn International Center for Conflict Studies. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you for having me again.
Yes. So we discuss security all the time, Dr. Ogini, and this has been going on now for what, about 16, 17 years, if not more? And instead, with all the money that we hear that government has pumped into this, the marching orders that presidents have given to generals to make sure that this thing is taken care of, it doesn't seem like much is happening. And these groups seem to be multiplying and their activities are escalating. What do you think is responsible for this?
I think it's a whole lot of things, but I will just highlight three things that we need to talk about. The fragility in terms of the regional cooperation in those regions actually play a major role. The second point has to do with also the localities, the terrain itself, and how it becomes a fertile ground for local people to quickly join this armed group. The third point has to actually do with they have incentive to continue. Maybe we can discuss this a little bit. In terms of governance, as you know, that before we have multinational joint task force, which has been set up since 2015 to work, for example, to clear this hideout of the Boko Haram and ISWAP, especially JAS That is now the former Boko Haram led by Shekau that died in 2021, and the Bakura-led group, also that of Jazz. So what is important to know with this is that over time, if you observe, there have always been somehow lack of mistrust among different state actors. And this also creates what we can call a loophole where there's a progress at one end and there is no progress on the other end. For example, Niger, when this issue of the coup happened, they withdraw, they did not participate in the Lake Sanity 2. But not just only that, even the whole Lake Sanity 1 and 2 operation only took 3 months. There was no sufficient fund to continue this operation. And that also means that the armed group have high level of turnover, and this is very important to take note. The second incentive is also has to do with, for example, the aspect of the approaches that we adopted when it comes to defection approach. There are a whole lot of things to talk about there on how do you actually de-radicalize, how do you release people who don't really pass through anything, how do you classify these people, how do you talk to people who still maintain active communication with the combatant in the forest. This is also another point that creates incentive for this armed group to thrive. But the third point is the existing tension, especially when you look at the Northwest, which I would also like to talk much about, and how Lakwa infiltrate this area and how they develop into what they are. Of course, in the north-central Nigeria, we already know that ISWA operate in this area. Around the Kanji Dan and all those areas, there are already issues there. So this also contributes to that. So we will also have to talk about this existing ethnic tension, or which we call banditry. We really have to open the Pandora of, is it really bandits? At what point these activities is bandit activities, and at what point is actually a jihadist armed group? So this play quite a role both in the Northwest, in the North Central, and in the Northwest.
The challenge is not that these things are happening for me, Dr. Ogini, and I'm going to take the question to Mr. Hassan. The challenge is not that these issues are happening and taking lives. The challenge is whether or not we could have seen them coming. For instance, state governors from northwestern Nigeria called on government on Thursday to put forward a new strategy to tackle an upsurge in Islamist militant attacks. We had the opportunity once to speak with the Jigawa state governor, and one of the things that he told us was that unless we close the gaps or close the ranks in the communities, where we may not be able to decisively put an end to all these issues of insurgency. So we wouldn't have this influx if our homes were secure, if we had significant community engagement. Would we, Mr. Hassan?
I think the governor is absolutely correct to say that a lot of these issues are community-centered. And would we see it coming? The question of seeing it coming. I think the security actors see it coming. I think that community members themselves actually identify many of these issues. But then I will touch a bit on the initial question, and I think that they are correlated in the sense that we've been treating cancer, but then we're not treating the root cause of cancer, right? We've basically been taking pills, taking Panadol, taking paracetamol for a bigger problem. And why do I say this? At the end of the day, the significant issues that has made insurgency, banditry, terrorism fester in many of these communities exist. The issues of lack of education, employment, the lack of governance, so to speak, in many of these places. So communities ultimately have little or no trust in government. And when Dr. Ogini was talking earlier, and he made mention of the issue of these groups festering and growing, it's important to reflect that communities have little or no choice, right? We've seen this insurgency, I think Alero was talking talking about. We've had this issue for nearly 16 years now, and it's important really to look and say what is the problem, right? What is the problem, and how do we respond to this problem? We can. This is not a conflict where you're basically going to win with guns or you're going to win with kinetic approaches, and that's what the governor of Jigawa State, I believe, is talking about when he mentions the use of communities. Many communities know where these bandits are, know who these terrorists are. Many communities can identify them. Many communities work with the state actors. The question then remains, what is the sincerity of the state to resolve this problem? And in resolution of these problems, how holistic do you want to resolve this problem, right? Are you going to resolve the causal factors, right? The actual factors, the issues of state neglect that has led to many people being almost joining these groups or even having little or no choice but to live side by side with this group. That's another discussion as to people negotiating every day to live side by side with either ISWAP or Boko Haram or even Mahmudawa as they are being called now. So I'll stop here. The truth is, communities do know where they are. Communities work closely with the state actors, but what is the sincerity of the state, and how has the state responded holistically to resolve the causal problems, and not necessarily, you can't keep tying first aid or bandage to a problem when someone has a broken bone. It's not going to work.
Let me ask Dr. Ogini, and you also heard Mr. Hassan speak about the fact that people have already begun to negotiate some of these issues themselves. So, Dr. Ogini, a new report by your institution, the Bonn International Center for Conflict Studies, reveals that people are negotiating with JAS and ISWAP insurgents, despite the government's hardline in the Lake Chad basing against negotiating with non-state actors or non-state armed groups. Civilians, we understand from your report, are negotiating hostage releases with ISWAP, JAS insurgents, and these seem harmless, but in reality, according to your report, they put border communities at risk of further violence. Is it that the governments at these subnational levels are unaware of this occurrence? What do you make of this, and what are the likely consequences?
Thank you very much for this point. I think it's important to first highlight that the issue of negotiation is not just only in the Northeast. I will go back to the Northeast and what we mean there, what we actually met there. Currently, if you go to Castina, there are 2 local governments that actually have secure agreement with bandits. So what happened is in December, so we were around those places. But right now, the bandit is not attacking these 2 communities. And when I further probe why, and say because the community were able to work with the local government and with the involvement of some security operative, so the bandit could not attack this area. But these bandits stayed in the forest. They visit the market without doing anything to these 2 areas, these 2 local government, but they go out somewhere else to stage attack. So this is just to give you how this armed group continue to recuperate, how they conduct the activities, and how they are able to gain more access to fund their terrorism. And so over time, by the time they are discovered again, or the new government, or maybe at the state level, they say, no, clear all these bandits, they will start attacking those 2 communities again. So this is how the nature of negotiation, that's how it's happened. With respect to the Northeast, you are aware that there are Bonu model which enable people to come out to surrender their weapon. We visited several communities that actually people just left the forest and they were just taken to the community. So, and through this discussion, these people will continue to say, look, we have our contact with the active combatants and they exchange information. But what is now more important is some of them actually, through bargaining process, were able to be recruited by the military to work for them on the front line. So immediately the people in the forest get to know that this fellow actually is supporting the military the community, wherever he lives, is attacked. So this is one of the elements where you can talk about this risk. As you all know that this is a cross-border economy, it's a border area where we have different sort of criminal networks who also work within this space, some of who actually provide logistic support to the armed group. For example, the issue of fuel, I can count at least 10 border region within Nigeria, Northeast Axis, where fuel actually passed through to Cameroon or Niger, which is also getting paid in a double price bought by this armed group to fuel their economy or to actually power their vehicles. So this kind of individual also have access to them, and they negotiate how they do, for example, for how they help them to farm, how to pay from their harvest in order not to be attacked. So this continue, but the moment military attack in the nearby area, this armed group will think that any of the community member collaborate with the military, and that will actually result to casualty. So this is one of the elements. You were mentioning the aspect of ISWAP drone issue in the border of Cameroon. Actually, previously, ISWAP did not control Cameroon border, especially if you talk Logo Luchare, Mayo Chanaga, the whole of the far north itself, or Mayo Moscow, all those areas, they are not controlled by ISWAP. But over time, in the last 7 months, things have actually changed, and ISWAP were able to negotiate with some faction of the armed group, Boko Haram there, which they are technically don't have enough power in that area, and that's how they were able to infiltrate, and they become very strong right now in that border.
I was, Mr. Al-Hassan, I was reading somewhere this morning that these groups were offering large sums of money to young people to join them. They are recruiting people and they're offering them money, plenty of it, to join them. The issue of lack of education, I think we mentioned as this program started that Botswana and Burkina Faso have said that education is free for all their citizens from primary school up to university level. So the issue of a lack of education and a lot of idle young people is playing a large role in this problem that we have in this country. Should government not be paying more attention to the issue of educating young children?
Absolutely, Alero. Thank you so much. I think absolutely, Alero. Thank you so much. I think there's so much research. We have a research coming out soon that also highlights some of the factors that have led to people joining extremist groups or bandits in the Northwest. And education ultimately props up, or the lack of. But I don't want us to look at education from a very face value perspective. There are different forms of education. There are different types of education, and then the kind of education that is required in a conflict context is entirely different. Before I go specifically into education, I would like to also highlight that the factors that the enabling environment for insurgency and terrorism, it's a conflagration of factors. It's not just whether you provide education and people go to school. No. Do people feel a sense of governance? Do people feel that their voices are being carried along, right? Do people have access to jobs, access to basic amenities? What is their perception of justice, for instance? Do people feel just? It's important at this juncture to also reflect that just before the program started, you spoke about governance and you spoke about the issues that Nigeria as a whole faces resources. What we have to understand is that whatever our political class does has a significant ripple effect across different societies differently, right? And as such, what you then find is if someone is supposed to utilize financial resources to build a primary health care center, and then they embezzle that money, and then 10, 15 years down the line, someone doesn't have access to health care, for instance, or someone's brothers die or his sister dies, that creates an enabling environment alongside the lack of education, the lack of many, many other things. I always say when we go to communities, I think Dr. Guinea was mentioning many of the communities that we visited. We were in Gudu in Sokoto, that parts of it is being controlled by Lakurawa. And so it's not a question of whether these people were educated or not. It's also the assumption that we think that these people do not necessarily, community members in particular, are not educated on the global affairs, right? And there and then people were saying, look, do you think that we are not human beings like you? Do you think I do not have needs to meet? Do you think I don't have a family to feed? So again, it goes back to the issue of the state. You know, I have a professor who used to say that the state is supposed to be the biggest authority that should exert violence. Unfortunately, that's not the case, right? So to answer your question, yes, state governments, in particular state governors, because oftentimes in Nigeria when we talk about governance, we're always talking about governance at the federal level. And one of the things we've seen is the lack of these basic amenities, particularly a lack from the state government in particular. They have to do more in ensuring that people are not only educated, but the kind of education. In this day and age where people are talking about nanotechnology and people are talking about AI, we're still talking about a curriculum from God knows when. So it's important also the type of education. I bet you know, I think on one of your programs, one of the guests mentioned that if you give Boko Haram the defense budget that you've given to Nigeria, they will run Nigeria down. As a researcher, I am backing what he has said. That's true. So, and if you reflect this with education, the amount of money that's being put into education, yes, a lot of people have come to say these monies are not enough and we need to do more. Yes, but if you reflect the Nigerian state side by side with whether it's ISWAP or whether it's Boko Haram, if you juxtapose both on a side-to-side basis, you will see that if you're giving them the resources that they are using to, in quote, educate their people, they will, and the money that you've given local governments or state governments to educate our people, you'll see that we haven't done much. So what is the problem? Right? What is the problem? Which is why in my opening, I made mention of the issue of state sincerity. You know, I made mention of the issue of state sincerity. When ISWAP is, you will be shocked some of the pictures that is going on. ISWAP and Boko Haram are using technology. Apart from drones, they're using things like TikTok now to draw in younger people, sermons that should not find anywhere that should not be anywhere on any media platform, and making it on social media platforms. That's a type of education, and this leads to the issue of terrorism everywhere. Terrorists have an incredible capacity to imagine possibilities that do not exist currently, and oftentimes state actors every time always play catch up.
Doctor, sorry. To your mind, are these groups getting stronger in Nigeria? They seem to be gaining more ground.
I can't hear them.
Dr. Ogini, I said, are these groups getting stronger then?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
They are. The ISWAP is getting stronger, but that's not just only ISWAP.
Okay, I can hear
ISWAP
you.
have different varieties, and these have learn from each other. If you look at Lakura group, just imagine, actually saw the opportunity of the state vacuum, and they actually feel it. So we have many of them that way, which are not technically armed group. They are bandits, but there are some that are actually armed group. So the first thing that we need to discuss is, at what point do we say this is banditry? We need to actually talk about what characterize the activities of this armed group to actually turn to bandit. I will just make mention of a very important point here to say that many of the area where banditry happen, there's a possibility for a jihadist to grow in this area. You can count many of those areas. They have connection. For example, Lakurawa, that we know that actually was to support the community to fight banditry. From our research, we found out that Lakurawa also work with some specific type of bandit group. So then that comes to the extent that, okay, do we really say Lakurawa is exclusively a jihadist insurgent, or they also work along with other groups? So this connection make them stronger. So this is what I would say. Mustafa was mentioning the aspect of education. The other point that we need to highlight is that most of the people in the local community actually have more information than people who think they are in the city, because there are 3 points I want to highlight there. First, these local people, when they talk to you, you will see the understanding that they even know the government, they know the senator, they know what they do, they know the amounts they receive, and they know when they come and when they leave. This is one point. The second point is that in the city area, what we find out is that most of the people who are actually doing this kidnapping, the fund does not go to the rural area. They actually fund in the city, because there's nothing somebody can do with ransom in the forest. You cannot collect money and pack and just pile them up in the forest. So we have also this link that actually strengthens the alliance of this armed group. For example, the armed group, the one that operate at the lower end, who actually conduct the attack, they are younger people. Those who stay in the forest as a backup, they are a bit older one. And those who supply the weapon, they are not even living in the forest. So this connection and network actually strengthen them internally. As you know, in our research, we were able to find out that kidnapping in Lake Chad Basin, at least $36,000 per ransom per household. So where do they get this $36,000? The community donates, everybody donates from their income, from their farm, from their cattle, in order to survive. So if they can have $36,000, how much would they gain over a period of a year? From our research, we're able to find out that even ISWAP collect at least 3 billion from zakats. Zakat is like an alms giving. This alms giving, they don't collect it just in the forest. They collect it in places like Maduguri, like Potoskom, like city. Because most of the people who operate in this area, they own their cattle, they own their farm in the forest, and they need protection of those things. So this is how they get stronger. Aside from the connection with the High C, High C gave them around close to $700 million. But aside from that, so this sort of network help them to grow. They have incentive to continue. The other part is the aspect of Bonu model, which I was mentioning, very great program with respect, but there are also issues there. So far, this armed group, the local people can help the military to fight the battle. They don't consider the risk that are involved.
It sounds like there are so too many issues to even consider, and it will seem like we just seem to be taking baby steps where we should be leaping. Tom Egbele says, for instance, on X, militancy or terrorism is like a virus whose life cannot be destroyed except if clinically exposed and separated from its host. The federal government must develop strong strategies and tactics to stave it off. Complacency must not be allowed to set in by all means. Dare I add to it, Tom, that not just the federal government, but the states as well. I think Mr. Hassan, one of our guests, spoke to that earlier. The second one.
Right. It's a pity we've completely run out of time. I know we haven't touched all the grounds that we meant to touch this morning, but that's the way it is. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Mustafa Al-Hassan, international development expert, and Dr. Oyewole Ogini, senior researcher, Born International Center for conflict studies. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming to share your insights with us this morning. Sunrise will return in just a moment. Do stay with us.